All right, welcome to This Week in Mythic Plus, and we have a lot to discuss this week. As class tuning has occurred, major class tuning hit the realms, right at time of recording this, at least on NA, and there's also the Mythic Plus titles that came out that have had some controversy. So let's take a second to actually talk about what we've seen this week so far in Mythic Plus, kind of talk about some of the big winners and losers in terms of, just from a Mythic Plus perspective. There was a couple of the most meta specializations that were hit in class tuning. Vengeance Demon Hunter getting deflecting spikes, increased chance to parry. That's been reduced to 10%, was previously 15%. Largely irrelevant nerf. Vengeance Demon Hunter is mostly immortal. This does end up equating to a little bit more than 5% parry from my understanding, but I don't think it's going to be too big of a deal. On the other side of things, Fire Mage, all damage dealt reduced by 3%. We were already seeing a lot of Fire Mage being play. I suspect that they weren't 3% the best. They were just one of the better specializations. Beyond that, a couple of specializations that got buffs that were pretty good. Moonkin is excellent. You're seeing it a lot in a lot of the top runs. Baluster getting a pretty sizable single target buff around, probably around like 5 to 7% on single target. It kind of depends on the situation, kind of depends on your talents a little bit. But a single target buff nonetheless. It doesn't really affect Mythic Plus too much, but it's going to make them definitely more competitive on single target where they were lacking substantially. Dev Evoker catching a 5% buff. This is a huge deal. I think that Dev was kind of creeping up. I think that Kess is actually doing some pretty high keys on Dev. I don't think Dev is like the best specialization in the game by any means, but I think that Dev was already proving that it could kind of be competitive, and now with another 5% on top of that makes that specialization a lot better. Very close to some of the top tier specializations. You also had, and this is going to sound a little bit weird, Ellie Shaman getting buffed. Now, Ellie Shaman isn't necessarily something that was super popular, but it's actually very, very good. You do see it played a little bit in China, and in general, it just does a ton of damage. Now, most of the damage that it's gaining are on abilities that aren't really pressed in Mythic Plus. So it ends up equating to maybe around a 1 to 2% damage gain for Mythic Plus specifically. It was way more of a raid-focused buff, which makes sense. Ellie sucked in raid, but around a 2% buff for Mythic Plus is not really something to scoff at. We also had the two best healers getting nerfed this week with Disciplined Priest and Mistweaver Monk. Reading through these, this is basically purely just going to bring down Mistweaver Monk's damage, not really hit their HPS at all. Maybe whenever they're pressing Spinning Crane Kick, their damage is going to go up, but they weren't pressing Spinning Crane Kick until, like, I don't even know, something comical like 12 targets or something like that before. So maybe Spinning Crane Kick gets pressed more frequently, but I don't think their damage is definitely going to get nerfed. So yeah, that's kind of that. With Disc Priest, it's kind of interesting because Disc Priest actually overheals their ramp a lot. But Atonement has a huge modifier for it in Mythic Plus, and so now Atonement causes spell damage to kill all targets affected by Atonement for 32% of damage done, was previously 35%, does not apply to PvP combat. Will this end up mattering? The answer is probably not. There's maybe a key level where this ends up mattering, but the rumblings are kind of have already been there, where they're thinking that Disc Priest is going to get out HPS checked by a specialization like Resto Druid later on in the season. If that is true, and we don't know that necessarily to be true, but if it's true, then a nerf like this is going to solidify that maybe being even more true. Where now Disc Priest was maybe going to be 0.2 key levels lower from the HPS check department. Now it's half a key level lower or something like that. I'm just speculating here. I suspect that Disc Priest is still going to be excellent. Lenience causing Atonement to reduce damage taken by 2%, was previously 3%, is in my opinion also. It's not a huge deal, but whenever you're pushing bleeding edge keys, it could be a bigger deal, but this isn't something that's going to affect most people. I think that Disc is probably still going to be one of the bigger go-to specializations for healers whenever they're looking to push keys, because they just do so much stupid damage. Power Infusion is just honestly incredible. Protection Warrior, I made a take on the bench 2 episodes ago that if Prot Warrior actually didn't get changed at all, I thought that they were going to be the meta tank just because of their DPS output. And unfortunately, they got slammed. I think it was somewhere in the order of like 5 to 8% on single target and like 15% on AoE or something silly like that, is what Sense was telling me. Very unfortunate for Protection Warrior just in general. You weren't seeing a ton of them at the top level, but they were starting to creep up, right? You see some of them being played from China. They started to really contend with some of these Vengeance Demon Hunters that we're seeing like be super dominant. But taking as large of a damage nerf as that, I think is going to kind of leave them in existence where they can still play, in my opinion, because their damage was that high, but they're going to only be able to play really realistically with very specific compositions. I think something with like Prot Warrior with a Mistweaver Monk, a Feral Druid, an Enhancement Shaman, and then like X. And X is like Ret Paladin or something like that. That could be an excellent Protection Warrior composition where you're getting a lot of the raid buffs, you're getting the buffs that you really want for your melee comp. And I think that that would still be an excellent Protection Warrior composition with a bunch of specializations that are pretty good. Now, it kind of really depends on that. Just like how good that comp is. What is the max cap of that comp? Are the wizards going to prevail again, where Vengeance Demon Hunter plus Mage plus Disc Priest being the main core of the wizard composition? Is that going to be better than the core of Protection Warrior plus Mistweaver Monk? Who's really to say? But Prot Warrior getting a damage nerf definitely does them no favors in that regard. But I think that the tank meta hopefully is going to still be a little bit more diverse than it has been in the past. I kind of suspect that this is going to kind of cause a consolidation down to Vengeance, though, if I had to make a wager here. Okay, so it appears that the next topic for this week, it appears that the War Within Season 1 Mythic Plus title has been awarded to people who are below the cutoff and gain score in the postseason. I also know some people who this happened to. As you can see, this guy wasn't even close to title range on Season 1, but he got the title with postseason Rio. Cutoff might have changed a little bit with DQs, but there's no communication on any Western disqualification. Also, I know 2 players that should not have gotten title that got it. And then that caused for this post that said, WoW Mythic Plus has lost its entire competitive integrity with Season 1 War Within. Since it's now clear that Season 1 title has been rewarded to literally everyone that got above cutoff, with postseason IO from War Within Season 1, Mythic Plus has lost its entire competitive integrity. Also, the following things that happened during Season 1 were not punished. Getting fully raid buffed in exploiting follower raids, Mistletoe and Garrison verse buff, various other non-group buffs that were fixed quickly but led to no punishment, and there was a Necrotic Wake exploit using Brewmaster Monks and Mind Control, and all of them ended up receiving the title. So, I don't think it's as serious as there's no competitive integrity with War Within Season 1, and I'm going to be very frank. It doesn't matter as much as some people are going to say it matters, because this only ends up impacting a very small subset of people, and this, basically what it does is it makes you feel like the work that you've been doing is invalidated. Now, it doesn't make it right. I don't think that it's like one of those things that, oh, wow, Mythic Plus has lost their competitive integrity, but it's definitely the wrong stance if you don't actually punish people who are blatantly exploiting your game at every single avenue and like every single possible path. They're just choosing to do the wrong thing. And I think that while China publicly named and shamed everybody, like we kind of talked about last week, it's not very good whenever you have this chase reward being obtained by players who, again, getting follower dungeon buffs. Garrison, I actually think that this one's not. I think that this one's intended, which is stupid. But then the Dream Surge buffs, the exploits that were done with like Outlaw Rogues and Brewmaster Monks, none of the Outlaw Rogue exploits were actually removed. And it feels really shitty whenever you are one of those players who is actually trying to push. And it makes you feel like a lot of your time and your work is invalidated. Now, again, this doesn't really impact a lot of people. It's one of those things that impacts actually very few amount of people just over the course of the game itself. We're talking maybe 10,000 people at most across all regions. But realistically, that shouldn't change the fact that it's pretty bad to set the precedence of these players are actually continuing to get rewarded whenever they're exploiting the game. Season 1 of War Within was the most exploited season I've ever seen. Just point blank. It was by far the most exploited season I've ever seen, and it makes me kind of disappointed to see how many exploits that were just left in the game and players ended up getting no punishment for it. Mythic Plus really feels like the Wild West in that regard, and I wish that Blizzard would kind of come out and be like, this is okay or this isn't okay, and then start punishing people realistically with, we saw it with Zenkiki back in Dragonflight Season 4, where players got DQ'd from getting title because they were abusing Zenkiki the Druid quest. Now, if they came back and did that again, people would kind of be on high alert about like, okay, maybe we shouldn't be looking to exploit every single point in dungeons. But there was even stuff with Psychic Link in Dragonflight Season 4 where Shadow Priests were one-shotting mobs after Psychic linking off critters, and they were intentionally doing it, and those runs just stayed at the top of the leaderboard for the entirety of the season. Was that right? No, not really. I mean, that was really stupid. And the fact that those runs actually stayed was equally as stupid. And it just feels like Blizzard cares in the sense of they fix the bugs, but Blizzard doesn't care enough to go fix and hunt down and fix the problems that it caused, where players are gaining long-term score because during this one situation where something was bugged, they were able to gain something that was permanent, in this instance, more Mythic Plus score than they were reasonably supposed to have. But yeah, that's basically it. Concluding thoughts here. I've actually been enjoying the Mythic Plus metagame a lot. I feel like a lot of specializations, a lot of comps are actually fairly good. I think that things like even Enhancement Shaman and Rep Paladin that aren't seeing a ton of play at the absolute highest level are really OP. And so I'm interested in seeing how those develop over time. I think that we're about to have a consolidation down to a lot of tanks playing Vengeance Demon Hunter, which, it makes sense. Vengeance is super good. But are we going to see more groups start to play Unholy DK? We're actually seeing it a lot from China, but we're not seeing a lot from the rest of the world. Those are kind of the questions that we're going to be looking to see. And where do these class tuning effects end up affecting the Mythic Plus metagame? Who's really to say? But that was this week in Mythic Plus. I'll see you later. Goodbye.